Josh said here, Foolhardy Photography. Today I want to show you 5 tips on how to take better photos at night. Right after I give you these tips, I'm actually going to go outside when it's dark and I'm going to show you how I shoot at night. Tip number 1, shoot in manual mode. So you're going to need a camera that has manual settings. Why? Because you have full control over your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. The 3 pillars or the triangle of exposure, essentially those 3 things will help you control your exposure, and you need to learn them. And that won't just help you at night, it'll help you overall in photography. So tip number 2, stabilization. Get a tripod.
Yeah, so I've had this tripod for like 4, maybe 5 years. I only paid like $100 for it. It's like indestructible. I don't think I'll ever have to get a new one. It's pretty broken.
Stick your camera somewhere where it's not going to move. Especially shooting at night, you're doing long exposures, and when you're doing a long exposure, it's really easy to touch your camera and then boom, blurry. You have an out of focus image, not what you want. So you can use a trigger, or you can set your camera to a 2-second timer, but make sure your camera is somewhere stable, it's not moving. Honestly, sometimes I'll just stick my camera on the ground in a puddle, get a wicked reflection. Why? Best reflection you're gonna get is in the puddle. Tip number 3, check the weather. I know it sounds obvious, but do you really wanna go randomly without checking the weather? It starts raining, your gear's all wet, you're wet.
Came here to take some pictures, and of course it starts to rain, so I still have to take some pictures.
Nobody wants that. But if you want to shoot in the rain, you made sure to check the weather, then you're prepared. It's not bad to shoot in bad weather, you just need to be prepared. So yeah, check the weather. Number 4, composition. It's just finding something to shoot. You don't need to be at a famous monument, a castle, or like one of the wonders of the world to get a good image. You just need a decent composition. So just go out and look. Honestly, look for leading lines, look for reflections, look for cool colors, look for cool things that you see, and if you can capture what you see and stick it in your camera, you're good to go. That's what you need to do. And tip number 5, the settings on your camera. I suggest that you shoot in both RAW and JPEG, just in case you start to use software, and then you can come back and you can start re-editing those photos later with a higher quality image. Next thing I would suggest to figure out is where your white balance is on your camera. What white balance essentially does is it judges what white is based on the light source, and not every single light source is going to give you an exact white. So you can either adjust the color temperature, go way up for warmth and down for cold, or you could use custom. Custom white balance is essentially telling your camera what white should be. You can use a preset, or you can use auto. This is really up to you. Choose your white balance on location to get the color temperature that best suits your needs. For an aperture, I generally shoot between 7 and 16 at night. This way I get a larger or deeper depth of field. That means more is in focus. Different scenes will require a different aperture based on your needs. Sometimes I will shoot portraits, so I'd shoot between 1.8 probably and 2.8 to get a nice blurry background. This is the first thing that I'd choose, is the aperture, because this is what I want to know. This is depth of field. Then I'll start to adjust the shutter speed. Essentially, what is the shutter? It just is how long the camera is being exposed to light, how long the shutter is actually open, like a window blind. It is open for a certain amount of time to let in light. That is what the shutter is responsible for. So what is ISO? Right? It is light camera sensitivity. It is the sensitivity of the sensor. The higher you go, it amplifies the signal. It doesn't actually make the sensor more sensitive. It just amplifies the signal of the light coming in. So the higher you go, the more noise is created. So it's best to keep it at around your base ISO. Which on most cameras is 100. Generally what I shoot at night is like landscapes and cityscapes. I do portraits at night too, but that's a whole different scenario, but I'm only going to go through how I shoot sort of cityscapes and landscapes today. So I'm going to show you how I set up my camera settings when I'm shooting at night. Alright, let's go there. Hi. Yeah, so I am at the Monument to the Battle of the Nations. know I said you can take night photos anywhere. You don't have to be at a monument or a wonder of the world, but you know, when in Rome. So right now I have to think about a composition. Okay, the first thing I would do is check what kind of lens you're using, because if you have a lens with image stabilization, you're going to want to turn the stabilization off.
So if your camera's on a tripod and you have image stabilization on, then the image stabilizer will try to stabilize the image stabilizer and you'll get a blurry image.
This one doesn't have that. It does have autofocus, so I'm actually going to turn that off as well. Try and shoot in live view, it'll help you at night. So I'm going to so my ISO is at 100, and I'm going to choose my aperture, and in this case I chose 8. And then from there I have to balance out my exposure. I have to see how my camera is reading the light, and it has a built-in light meter.
I'm going to quickly run over the different metering modes. Different brands of cameras will have different names for the metering modes, but they roughly do the same thing. Evaluative metering reads the light from the entire scene, but prioritizes where you're focused on, and then does exposure compensation to try to get you the best possible exposure. Center-weighted metering is very similar to evaluative metering. It reads light from the entire scene, but it prioritizes the middle of the scene, and then it averages the amount of light without any exposure compensation. Spot metering reads light from the middle focus point and a little bit around it. It's essentially the most precise. Partial metering reads light from just a tad bit more area in the center than the spot metering.
So all of these different metering modes are just different ways in which the light meter in your camera reads and analyzes the light to help you balance out your
aperture and shutter speed.
It's not always 100% accurate, but you want to get it to the middle and then sort of tweak it from there. So right now you can see that it is underexposed. So I'm just going to add more exposure, a longer shutter speed. And I'm going to put it to 15, and that says it about right. And I'm going to tweak my focus and zoom in and get as close a focus perfect as I can. Pull back. Now of course I have my basically I have it set to a 2-second delay before I shoot, so this way I don't shake the camera at all before I take the photo. So now I'm just going to hit. This isn't the greatest sort of composition, but it's out of the wind, and that so far that's helped me right now because it was shaking my camera. When the wind dies down, I'm going to go and try to find a better composition for sure. All right, and that is the image. You can see that it's really just on the light, and you can see that's where the metering was focusing on, that little area where all the light is. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to overexpose the thing. So I'm going to add a bit more time. See where that gets me. So yeah, it's a little bit more. But again, that is a super bright spot, and then everything else is really dark. Okay, so I found a new spot. I like this composition. So as you can see in the shot here, over here is a big light. So I want to put the aperture way up here. I'm going to put it up to about 14. And I'm going to compensate. So that 30 seconds is underexposed.
So now I'm going to raise up the ISO.
And I'm going to let it rip. But I should probably double check the focus, which is good. All right. Okay, shot's taken. So you can see by having that sort of higher aperture, I get this nice little starburst on the corner here, which I kind of like. And you got these super spooky trees. You know, and again, this is about the whole metering system inside. You're trying to balance out that meter to get the proper exposure. Okay, to sum things up, annual mode, stabilization, check the weather, composition, the settings, annual focus. And of course, use your focus, check your lens, make sure there's no image stabilization. If there's image stabilization, take it off. Your camera to a 2-second timer. Choose your white balance. Start with your base ISO, then choose your aperture. Generally, a small hole, a small aperture, high f-stop. That'll give you a larger depth of field. Once you have that, then start adjusting your shutter speed, essentially a long exposure, especially at night. If that doesn't get to the middle of the meter for you to adjust,
Then bring up your ISO.
That's when you start adjusting ISOs, when you have everything else in place. If this did help you, remember to please like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. And also check me out on Instagram and Facebook. Links are in the description. And again, cheers and thanks for watching.